After a successful decade run as a featured documentary, Eyes of the Mothman is now a podcast containing bonus information and, for the first time ever, the complete, unedited field interview tapes with eyewitnesses, experts, and those who were directly impacted by the Mothman incidents that occurred in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and 1967. Although this podcast is meant to act as a historical record and an archive of the events that transpired, all material contained here is not for reproduction without the written consent by the copyright holder, Redline Studios, Incorporated. Episode 22 of Eyes of the Mothman, the podcast, is here, and it's revisiting our field interview tape with Donnie Sergent Sr., which was conducted out at the McClintic Wildlife Preserve at the ponds, the very ponds that Donnie caught his mutated fish and was the main reason why we interviewed him. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Donnie's story is that he's a local resident. His son was the co-author of one of the first Mothman books, along with Jeff Walmsley. And so I originally tried to interview his son, but he was not interested at the time. He had kind of taken a step back after writing the book and just didn't want to kind of partake in any of that stuff, like be in the limelight in any way, which I respect. But I was able to connect with his father, and through that process, interestingly enough, found that he had this really great story of fishing the ponds of McClintic and catching a fish. Do you remember, what was the mutation? I want to say three-eyed fish, but that's The Simpsons.
No, it had like a pointed tail. It didn't have the fins that the fish is supposed to have. It was like it came to a point at the end, is what he said.
Yeah, like a spear.
Yeah.
It was like a strange mutation. And again, it's funny, these interviews that pop up, that one was not planned or, really, I didn't go out there looking to find somebody who had a mutated animal species story, but it just came about. And so it's fun in that that the McClintic is going to be part of your story and part of your film, and you don't really know to what length, right? Like some people, you talk about the length of the film, it is a lengthy film, but part of that was born out of what we had access to. When you start to realize like, oh, here's this scientist, here's this biologist, here's this Army Corps of Engineer guy, here's this local who caught a mutated fish. That's enough to make, a 20-minute segment and not have it be boring and too long-winded, because you're getting multiple perspectives. And, to counterbalance, the scientist, the biologist talking about the mutations there. Well, here you have an everyday regular guy who used to fish out there all the time. And I thought he had a very good story, and I loved the way he told it. I loved his voice. There's a sincerity to it, and there's just an authenticity to it. And I remember him also saying not just about catching the mutated fish, but just about the fear that he was somebody who hunted and fished out there. But once Mothman started to come about, he said, I'd stop coming out here, and I would not come out here, and I still won't. And this is like, he's a pretty tough dude. You can kind of tell, like, Donnie has probably seen his share of beer, motorcycles, and bar fights, I would say. I jokingly say that, but he just seems like a tough guy. And so for him to say, I'm afraid to go out and fish these ponds because of a monster, again, you start to go, there's something to this. And it just adds to it and adds to the authenticity of, again, the story that these people believe and feel strongly that there's something out here to be feared. Do you guys remember interviewing Donnie and anything about him?
I do remember that. I remember he was very of the area, the voice, the accent, the whole thing. But I can't remember exactly what he did with the fish once he caught it.
He froze it. I think he put it in the freezer and he froze the fish.
Did he bring it to a lab or something like that?
No, he ate it.
I don't remember, but I remember him saying that he froze it.
Really? I don't remember that.
I don't know if it's in the, well, yeah, it probably would be, yeah.
I don't remember that at all. I thought he would have thrown it back.
I don't think that made it into the movie, but I kind of remember him saying he froze it.
Yeah, there were a lot of these things that people, looking back, it's been a long time. Some of it might be on tape, some of it might not be, because you kind of mix it all together, the off-camera comments. I do also remember Donnie do you remember he was talking about, it was, I think a friend of his worked at the military base, and he was saying that the word on the street was always that there was like more to it. That there was like a fear there, like almost like an Area 51 thing. Just that he didn't want to talk about it on camera, but I remember him saying, like, I believe a close friend of his worked at the military base and had more stories that he just didn't want to openly share.
I thought maybe I'm remembering wrong. I thought maybe he worked there.
He might have.
I think maybe he might have been the one to work there.
He might have.
We interviewed him before we went to the Army Corps of Engineers, and I remember we were telling him that we were going to go there, and he was like interested in what they would say. Yeah,
he definitely had suspicions and stories again about the military base and what its purpose was beyond what was out in the public. He had an interesting perspective, and then the fish story. It's weird, and again, it confirms what people like Scott Simonton and the Army Corps of Engineers were saying about the area, that these chemicals will mutate species. And what I find to be interesting is that we didn't seek this out. Like it was just kind of like, hey, you know who you should talk to? Talk to Donnie Sergent. He caught a fish that's not right or mutated, and like I kind of love that about this story and the idea that it's small town, and that it doesn't mean that it's simple. It doesn't mean that it's not educated. It just means that it's close, and that, right, this guy's grandfather fought in the Battle of Point. Like they can just direct you. And like we kept having these little links and connections, and it was fun. It was fun to kind of go, oh, what are you talking about? Oh, the mutated animals? Go talk to that guy. He caught one. It was like almost not easy, but it once you got out there and people trusted you, it opened up doors. And that's what was fun as I look back to these things and these people. It was like gaining some trust, building relationships, and then reaping the benefits of just that simple idea that like, we're not going to make you out to be stupid.
No, and you weren't, as much as you were asking investigative questions, you weren't challenging their authenticity. You weren't in a direct sense. You weren't saying, oh, come on, this is another fish story. This is another the one that got away story. You were treating them, with the understanding that they were being sincere and that they were being forthcoming. And if you were like, some journalist who wanted like a great story, you would try to catch him in a lie or catch him in this or catch him in that. But I think they were treated with respect no matter what they said and no matter what, kind of walk of life or expertise that they had. Okay, this is what you say. This is what you claim. Let me know more about it. And it was fair.
Yeah, we're not out to prove you right. We're not out to prove you wrong.
Right.
We're just here to hear your story, and that's it. And you know what? Like you kind of take some creative liberties to modify the length of their responses, but for the most part, you're not misrepresenting what they had to say. Donnie, another character that I think bleeds through the camera. I remember his accent, his voice, the sincerity of his story, and overall, he was just a really good guy. And so I'm looking forward to taking a look back at his interview. Hopefully you enjoy the interview as well. This is with Donnie Sergent Sr., local resident of Point Pleasant, who had a very interesting story about catching a mutated fish out in the McClintic Wildlife Preserve.
Yeah. And you can just look at me, and what I'll do is I might ask you the same question more than once.
Fine.
It's just I'm trying to get a different answer to pick from. That way I have some options to pick from later.
Sure.
If I ask you anything that's like wrong or something that you don't know, just tell me, and then we'll just skip the question.
Okay. Sure.
The one thing that's always good to makes it always look really nice in the end when I use it later is when I ask you a question, later on, my question's not going to be there. Only your answer is.
Sure.
So if I say, just for example, like, how's the weather today? If you say bad, later on, all I'll have you saying is bad. But if you say, the weather looks bad today, it's kind of like a complete sentence. People know you're talking about the weather because you put it in your answer. So if you try to like restate the question in your answer, it always sounds good. That way people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
That way if I say like, tell me about the TNT plant, if you say, oh, it used to be a scary place, no one knows what you're talking about. But if you say the TNT plant was a scary place, then people know what you mean.
Sure.
Because like I said, my question won't be there at all in the end.
Okay. Donnie Sergent, DONNIE SERGENT.
You want me to put senior on there too, or just Donnie Sergent?
Just Donnie Sergent. That's my given name. I mean,
Okay, good.
yeah. People see me out there every morning mowing grass, pair of shorts on, no shirt. Yeah, it's hot
Interesting weather.
blood. Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. So usually with the things, sometimes people have like a title with their name, like, if someone's the guy I talked to before was part of the from Marshall University, so I put his name and then whatever from Marshall University. For your title, should I just put like resident Point Pleasant or something like that?
Yeah, resident of Mason County, or
Okay, that's good. Resident Mason.
yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to ask you some questions first about the TNT plan. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can you just tell me a little bit about the TNT plan here, back from when you were around living in this area? Can you, before anything weird happened, before like Mothman and stuff, tell me like what the TNT plan area, like what did people come up here for? There was like, it was kind of a hangout for people, drag race, things like that. Tell me a little bit about like what kids come up to the TNT plan for before Mothman.
Okay, before Mothman, the TNT area was notorious number one for a good place to park and come up, if you want to bring some buddies and drink some booze, stuff, be off the main highways and so on and so forth. And fishing, people fished the different lakes, the different ponds, and then there were a few gentlemen that I recall that did some steel trapping in some of the lakes where there's beaver up here and muskrat and so on. And then a lot of people came up just to see the area. They never saw the area before. They wanted to see the ponds, where the power plant was, and then the domes that the munitions were buried in, and things like that.
Do you remember, after the Mothman sighting started up here, the TNT plant area kind of got a different vibe about it. And some people still came here and were not bothered by it, but there were some people that were scared because of what was going on up here. So it's kind of like the atmosphere changed. A lot of people weren't coming up here to park anymore to a degree because there was this fear that maybe the Mothman was out here. Do you remember like that happening? Do you remember kind of the different atmosphere feeling?
Yeah, yes, I do. I remember, a whole different feeling and a whole different atmosphere. And, even, especially the people who lived here local, they didn't, the TNT area was kind of, I'd say the 75% of the people in off limits area. I mean, they were afraid because they didn't know where this Mothman character that was spotted might be, and they knew nothing of it at that time and what had went on. And the fishing, I know I quit fishing up here. My wife and myself and my son, we fished up here. We'd bring a boat up, put in the lakes, fish, We'd come here and fish at night, most night fishing. But I got to where, I was Larry. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure or not, and it kind of, it puts kind of a little scare into you. It changes your whole outlook on the area.
Can you tell me a bit about after the TNT plant closed, it was found out that there was some chemical spills here that got into the water and in the grounds and things like that. Do you remember when that kind of started, when people in the area had heard that there was some problems with chemical spills from the old TNT plant?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I remember about the chemical spills in the different areas. They found buried containers, found drums, and so on that they didn't know, at that time that were there because it was a whole different generation, And, of course, the munitions, little huts there they had that they stored stuff in. There were things in those, that weren't too safe to be around. Even matter of fact, one time, one of them were broken into, some dynamite and so on was taken out of it, and so on, explosives, and that was taken care of, by the law. And it the lakes, ponds, they found those contaminated, and they had to shut a lot of those down and close them, close those up, and no fishing signs and so on. And but there was quite a bit of a contamination here.
And do you remember how the people around the town and in the area responded to when they heard that there was some chemical problems up here? Because, like you said, a lot of people were coming here to fish and spend time here. Were people concerned about the dangers that could be going on? Were they a little upset after they had heard? What was the reaction when people started hearing that there was a possible problem up here?
Yeah, when people started, realizing that there was a possible problem up here, and that it could, affect you in various different ways. I mean, they were leery about coming up here and fishing. Like I say, I know I altogether quit fishing up here, and I come up here and, well, before I quit fishing, I was fishing one day up there, and I caught a bass was about 14, 16 inches long. And the thing was weird. It had about a 4-inch mouth, and then the rest of the fish would just taper back in like let's say a spear, and then had a tail fin. It was weird, odd. And I kept it for a while, and with intentions of getting something done with it, and unluckily never took any pictures. But it ended up getting thrown away, and but it caused quite a stir. Definitely did, about the contaminations.
I'm going to ask you a couple of things about cornstalk now.
Okay.
Can you just tell me a little bit about what the legend of the curse of Chief Cornstalk is? For someone who's never heard that story, as if you're telling me for the first time, can you just tell me what the rumor is? What's the thing behind the Chief Cornstalk curse?
Okay, the thing behind the Chief Cornstalk curse, the way I understand this thing, and talk to different people about it, especially some people that had heard back from their generations and so on. My understanding is that there was to be a talk between, who was it? Mr. Dunsmore and Chief Cornstalk. It was, I think they were trying to reach, I believe, a peace agreement of some sort. That's the way I understand. And then, well, he came to the fort, in other words, to have these talks. And while he was in the fort, he got shot. Now, I don't know how, what, intentionally, or what this was for. But before he died, he placed a curse on the city of Point Pleasant, and the way I understand it, Mason County, and said that a curse would be put up on them that would last for, now, I can't say for sure how many years this was, but what I understand, he said for years to come. And that's my best understanding of that.
Do you think that a lot of townspeople believe in the cornstalk curse? And then also, can you tell me what certain things have been blamed on him over the last couple of centuries, like fires, floods, disasters, tragedies? You just tell me if people in town on the whole do they buy into the curse? Do they believe it? And then what type of things are blamed on?
Yes, I think there's several people in Point Pleasant that do believe in the cornstalk curse. They believe that this does have something to do with the sighting of the Mothman, and the Mothman coming about, and the fall of the Silver Bridge. And at one time, Point Pleasant had a pretty good fire downtown, burn up several businesses, several buildings. Well, the people come out, a few of your people, well, the curse of Cornstalk. Cornstalk's curse. We're getting part of his curse back there. Well, say like, I think it burned 5 or 6 stores, that they closed down, had to totally renovate. And yeah, there's people that actually do believe the cornstalk curse does have a part, in a bit in these things that have happened in the past.
Can you tell me again, even though you've already touched on it, can you just tell me about fishing in these ponds? You've fished in these ponds a lot, and you've been out here a lot. Can you tell me about, having a history fishing here and spending time here, and then also tell me about the unusual fish that you caught, what happened, what it looked like?
Yes, like fishing in this area, in these lakes and ponds and so on. And like right now where we're sitting, this is called the backwaters of the T&T ponds. This little stream up here runs down into this little pool, and there's a creek goes on down. This is all a creek. This is just a pool right here, goes on down. Okay, and people do come up here and fish quite often. People from out of town, will come up that are not really educated and understand what can be in these areas and, can cause problems. Now, I fished up here quite a bit, my wife, my son, and I, and we used to come up here, and most of our fishing here, we would do a good bit of night fishing, and we'd fish some in the daytime. But we'd bring a small boat, and put in the lakes and fish in there. And you always had not in all the lakes, but some of the lakes you had, an odor, just some kind of odor. I mean, I'm not saying that it's some sort of pollutant or chemical, whatever. Maybe it's a natural odor from algae or some other source of plant life that I don't know about. But in this one lake, I did catch a fish. It was a bass, and it was 14 to 16 inches long. And it should have been a nice bass because, well, actually the mouth would have been probably about 4 inches in diameter. And, which it was. Okay, the head and the mouth part, were perfectly normal. But from there back, it was a tapered type figure. In other words, tapered back like to a spearhead, clear back to the tail fin, and it had a kind of it was an odd tail fin too, but it did have a tail fin on it. And it was a very unusual fish. And so it's, at the time, I mean, we never thought anything about because the lakes that they thought were polluted were chained off, roped off, and so on and so forth. But I believe this fish here was a mutation that things that are in this soil that still, they don't realize where it all is.
And just being a fisherman for a long time, have you ever come across a fish like that ever?
No, sir. As long as I've fished, my gosh, I've fished since I was probably 14 years old, and I'm 62 now. And that's the only deformed fish in that manner that I've ever caught. The only one ever.
So, knowing that the chemicals out here could mutate a fish, do you think that, with that in mind, why not a bird? If it can mutate a fish, maybe it can mutate a bird. And with that in mind, maybe that offers a possible explanation to what some people were seeing out here. Can you tell me about that? About the idea of, if there's chemicals out here that can mutate a fish, firsthand you caught one, it's not that far-fetched to think that it can mutate a bird. And that's a possible scenario that's been suggested by people throughout the years of what Mothman might have been.
Yes, I think it's very possible that a bird out here, could have been mutated. I mean, I've looked at them before, but I can't remember the names of them now when this thing started. You've got several different types of cranes. Well, some cranes are large. I mean, they're like, say 4 foot. In other words, like that'd be from the bottom of the feet to the middle of the back. Okay. You take a crane that size, and some people, say, well, a sandhill crane is big. I don't believe a sandhill crane is quite that big. But if these cranes that were that tall, would get out in some of this stuff that's in these lakes, and if it can mutate a fish, all right, the cranes will feed on the fish, plus wade in the water, and, no doubt at sometimes drink the water. And I'm saying that a mutation is very possible through some of the things they could have picked up out of these ponds and out of this area. Even not only, like the water part of the deal, I'm talking about like the plant life and so on, like that.
I'm going to ask you some Mothman questions. Can you tell me what, when people were seeing the Mothman, doesn't have to be like a formal answer. Can you just list for me the characteristics of the Mothman, what it looks like, just like, red eyes, how tall, feathers, whatever, just a list of characteristics of what the Mothman looks like.
Okay. From what I've heard, different stories, what the Mothman looks like. Some people have said he was 7 to 8 foot tall, and I've heard 6 foot tall. Well, regardless, he was the Mothman, tall, somewhat, at least 6 foot. And he had bright, glowing red eyes. And they said he had large wings. I've heard similar to an angel's wings. And then had a body. They said his body was like a human body, the torso. And so to the best of my ability, that's about the main things, that I can remember about what was told about the.
And a lot of people talk about the eyes of it. Can you tell me a bit about the eyes of Mothman? What people, that seems to be the thing that always comes up about the eyes. Tell me about the eyes.
Yeah, they say they're bright, glowing red eyes. And I've heard, we have some pretty good people that are, that have saw this creature and described actually about the eyes. And I've known these people for years. And they say that I've heard different people say that the eyes were a glowing bright red, and they sort of, if you looked at them very long in a certain sense, they sort of would like, I don't know, something near like a hypnotic effect, and then that's what I've heard. I don't know, but they said that they were very bright, and they'd hurt your eyes.
Can you tell me, after the Mothman is spotted up here, we talked a little bit about it earlier, but just to kind of reiterate it, after the Mothman is spotted up here, can you tell me what it's like up in the TNT plant area now? Can you tell me, people were scared of it and they didn't come here, but then also people purposely came here looking for it. Even hunters came to try to shoot it and kill it. Can you tell me about all that kind of activity that went on after the Mothman spotted? We have all those different reactions to it. Tell me what it was like up there.
Yes, there's quite a bit of activity for a while in this area, the TNT area. People were up here and they were, like going through the area, maybe some had guns, maybe some didn't. And they were trying to, I don't know if to say, tromp the brush and flush the bird out, where somebody could get a shot at it, or at least get it flushed out where they could see it. And then you had a lot of sightseers. They would come and drive the roads, at night, wee hours of the night, trying to catch a glimpse of the glowing red eyes that were described. And but I think it kind of slowed down your parking lanes up here, in the area where people would come up for a little bit of recreation and entertainment, so to speak. It slowed that down one heck of a lot. I was up here, I don't know, maybe a time or two, just driving around to see, what it was like. And this thing went wild probably for about, let me take just a wild guess, 2 to 3 months. I mean, people, up here looking in the daytime. Looking through the brush and so on and so forth, driving around looking. And then after that, it sort of quieted back down to a normal pace. But there weren't as many people coming up here. And like a lot of the people, the fishing and so on, they were afraid to fish up here at night. Different people I've talked to were afraid to come up here and fish at night. And then they were actually afraid to come up here because of the Mothman. Possibility of it being mutated, and they didn't know what they were walking through, what they were walking, next to, or what was in the waters.
We don't have to do it all over again. We'll just pick it up from where it got loud. You were talking about people who were afraid.
Yeah, they were afraid, to come up TNT area, they like were afraid maybe that they might be confronted with the Mothman. Some of your, I guess you'd say, less brave people, and they didn't even want to get a look at it, much less be confronted or anything like that. And like I said again, the fishing. I know the fishing slowed down, and I know different buddies of mine, different people I know, they just quit come up here fishing, including myself. I wouldn't wet a line in the water up here right now for nothing, for no amount of money. Because you never know if you could have a open cut, open wound, and this water, you're all the time bringing your lure, plug, or your bait in, and cleaning the grass and all that stuff off of it. And who knows what might develop from this. Linda Scarberry, oh my God, her brother, or her husband, I guess it was, went to school. He was about 2 years behind me in school.
Do you remember when where that big sighting happened? And then you remember like with the buzz around school and stuff when he got back?
Oh, yeah. It was they people just aggravating to death, And he isn't around here now. He cleared out just too much. He just, he couldn't handle it. Just too much. He got out and left. But, my sister and him were boy and girl friends there for a while, probably way back in junior high school, She knew him. Well, I knew him. I remember him in school.
I'm going to probably ask you about that after I get done with this.
Okay.
Can you tell me that during all the Mothman kind of frenzy, people questioned whether it was good or evil, like an angel or a demon? Do you remember that kind of question? Did it separate the town a bit? Did some people believe in it and some people didn't? And then did it divide families? Did it divide friends? Did it separate people in the town? Because it was kind of so mysterious, people kind of didn't know what it was. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also, what were some of the ideas of what people thought it was?
Yes, there were, a lot of people. I mean, I've heard, I've heard some few choice words, people be discussing the Mothman, actually the validity of it, and then just being something, a figment of imagination and all that, they would, it kind of, I think in different areas, it kind of separated people. Actually, when the thing was first, reported, the Mothman, the different law officers, I won't say which departments or anything, because everybody was involved, and which would be a natural thing, they sort of, you're a hogwash, and there's these people trying to explain what they actually saw, what they really saw, and, it's hogwash. Well, after so many sightings, so many things like this, turned into the department, then they started kind of checking into it, and different people started coming in, but, it did work on Point Pleasant, I believe, and worked on the some of the different maybe families or friends and so on, and caused different feelings between them, hard feelings.
That's really loud. You bring your guns?
Why did I do that?
Are they? Did it? Because I've talked to some people that said it did like kind of divide the town a bit, and it kind of even like broke up friendships. Like, is it that severe, or is that just overstating it?
Well, I think it's kind of a little overstatement. I don't think it really, like broke up friendships or anything like that. It did kind of divide, like, different people's feelings and so on and so forth, because, they, that's just like you and I here, and we were friends, and you said, you're crazy. And I just said, well, no, I said, the thing actually, could be. Well, there's no way it could be, we have a few harsh words there toward each other, and it could kind of separate us, of course. I think later on the people kind of come back around, but it caused quite a stir. I mean, people, they were afraid. They didn't know whether to believe there was something, and whether to believe, that there was or wasn't. And different people just got kind of sidetracked. I mean, more or less on their feelings, and they didn't know what to do. But I think the different sightings and everything that had happened and were reported, that would kind of help that along a little bit, to get everything, all the ducks back in a row, so to speak, and people kind of understanding, maybe there is a possibility, and then kind of equalize out, their feelings there.
You remember kind of the rumors spreading a bit about what people thought it was. Some people thought it was good. Some people thought it was bad. Some people thought it was like a sign of something evil. Some people thought it was an angel. Some people thought it was a bird. Some people thought it was a monster. Can you just tell me about some of the things that people were calling it, what people's opinions were at that time? What were some people thinking it was?
Yes, I know different people thought, they said, well, they just passed it off. They said, there's nothing but sandhill crane. Sandhill crane is large, and it was sandhill crane is what it was. And, of course, then, they got to saying, well, no, it's not a sandhill crane because, a sandhill crane, okay, you might have a bird there to his head, standing up would be 5 foot. But this thing here was 6 foot to 8 foot, according on who you talked to and who saw it, And maybe sometimes the thing could have been crouched, sometimes it could have been standing, straight up. And a lot of other people, I've heard different people say, well, it's a figment of their imagination, or it's whatever they were on that night or drinking that night, that they saw these things. And but I've heard different tales like that.
When the Mothman was spotted, people started talking again about the curse of Chief Cornstalk. Was he blamed again for this too? Can you tell me, did some people think that Mothman had something to do with that?
Yes, yeah, it was spoken of, but about the curse of.
Sorry, can you just so people know what we're talking about? Can you tell me, when Mothman spotted, people started talking about Cornstalk's curse again, and they thought it had something to do with that?
Yeah, when when the Mothman was spotted, people started talking again about the curse of Cornstalk. And they thought that this had something to do with the formation of this big bird. Maybe it was caused through a curse, which would be unexplainable.
You're somebody who's kind of fished in the area of West Virginia and hunted in West Virginia. Can you just tell me, for people that have never been to West Virginia, can you just describe the type of terrain and environment that's here? It's pretty, a lot of mountains, a lot of places for something to hide. It's not like a small little place. There's lots of land here. Can you tell me, for someone that's never been out to West Virginia, what type of mountains and forests are out here? What type of deep woods are there?
Yeah, in West Virginia, your terrain is sort of hilly, and there isn't a whole lot of level land unless you get into river bottoms. Now, if you get on the river bottoms, you'll have level land, but most of your terrain, well, like even here in the TNT area, you have, ups, downs, hills, swamps, and then your main terrain in West Virginia, especially in our area, Mason County, I would say would be hilly terrain mainly. And there's plenty of brush and thickets, that anything could hide. I mean, it would be no problem at all. I mean, which could make it, well, just say, for instance, could make it difficult if something like the Mothman would still be out there, the possibility you'd never see it.
I'm going to ask you some questions about the UFOs that were going on. Can you tell me about the nightly UFO sightings that started to happen here in town too? I heard that there was a lot of them over the TNT plants and over the Ohio River. Can you just tell me about what was starting to happen, as if someone didn't know this story at all?
Yeah, they started sighting UFOs. It was in and around near the time the sighting of the Mothman. And they reported them from like Meigs County, which is Pomeroy, Ohio, up in that area, and that is right across the river from Mason County. And they saw these UFO sightings, over the river, and then they said they could see that they were down towards the TNT plant area. And then people from Mason County, reported different UFO sightings, and several different sightings of UFOs at that time that the the Mothman had been spotted, for a while, not a long time, but I'd say for a while, maybe 30, 60 days. And
can you tell me what type of things were people seeing in the sky? What were some of the things what these things look like? What were people reporting?
Well, a lot of people reporting seeing bright lights. And they said, it wasn't like an airplane, like something was moving. The light would just stay there. And different ones said that bright light would be there, and all at once it was a streak and it was gone. It was there no more. And some people even quoted as seeing, like, what they saw was in I don't know how to describe it, not a saucer shape, but the way the lights were, it would appear that it could be, on a saucer shaped craft.
And a lot of people, because the Mothman sightings were going on at the same time as a lot of UFO sightings, a lot of people, it seems, believe that the two had something to do with one another. Can you tell me about that? That's because the frequency, the Mothman sightings and UFO sightings were close to one another, and at the same time, a lot of people thought they were related.
Yes, sir. They thought that the Mothman could be related to the UFO sightings. Because a lot of people, in other words, thought that the Mothman could be an extraterrestrial type creature, and so therefore, you'd have a perfect, in other words, comparison of seeing the UFOs, and then around the same time frame, the Mothman appearing. And then a lot of the people that saw the Mothman said that he would appear, and different ones of them say that he would run into the brush, and other people say that it would appear and then he would just disappear right before their very eyes. So that's another reason that people were thinking maybe that he could have been, connected with the sightings of the USOs and extraterrestrial type object.
I'm going to ask you about the Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge was a major disaster, and then it was magnified because Point Pleasant's a pretty small community. So it was something that touched everybody. Everyone was affected by it because someone either knew someone on the bridge or was friends with someone on the bridge or had family on there. Can you just tell me about the Silver Bridge? The tragedy was even magnified more so because of the small town and about how everybody kind of had a relation to it.
Okay. On the Silver Bridge falling, well, I can just tell you, I was working at Carolina Lumber, which was about a block and a half away from the end of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant. And it was quitting time. We heard a loud rumble. The electricity went off. Come back on. So everyone locked up the store. We get out, and myself and Thornton Wood, which is dead now, got in my car, and we drove just a short piece. And there were cars array in the street. I mean, cars just parked at every angle, doors left wide open. And he looks up and he said, "That bridge is gone." I said, "What?" He said, "That bridge is gone." I said, "My God, it is." So we just left my old car sitting there in the street, doors open, and we took off running to get behind the flood wall. And when we got behind the flood wall, we could see the water swirling, and from the deep undertow of the structural steel on the blacktop, cement and everything else was in the bridge falling, was causing a terrible undertow down there. And you could see different things floating. And they said that right before this, that the people were up floating, screaming and hollering. And then all at once, there was a terrible undertow came up, took everybody down out of sight, and that's the last they saw them. But there were a few saved, call on bales and so on. And this thing here, it really stirred up the people, Point Pleasant, because, well, there were people working that worked in Ohio. It was time for them to get off work. They didn't know if they were on the bridge or over in the traffic. Telephone lines were shut down for emergency users only. Excuse me. And it was a terrible time. People couldn't get in contact with their loved ones and their relatives because of, like I say, the lines were used for official use only. And you had no way of knowing if mom, dad, brother, sister, son was on the bridge or if they were sitting on the other side. And it was a terrible thing when we walked over and, just looked down in there. I mean, it's something that just actually shocked you and stunned you till you didn't know what to think. You didn't know what to say. I mean, it was a horrific, blow to Point Pleasant. And the people, of course, later on after, we found out, I would say probably 60% of the people who were on the bridge I knew. Some were close friends.
This podcast is a companion piece to the original feature-length documentary film from 2011 of the same title. If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to see the film that started it all by visiting www.eyesofthemothman.com.
When the collapse of the bridge happened, did that stir up controversy again about the Mothman? Did it kind of bring out more rumors? Did people start thinking the Mothman had something to do with the bridge, or the curse had something to do with the bridge? Did the bridge kind of bring up more rumors again about curses and Mothman?
Well, the bridge, when it fell, it brought up more rumors about the curse of Cornstalk and the Mothman. Some believed it to be, maybe the curse of Cornstalk. Well, and there were some others, I don't know who they were at the time, but they said the day before the Silver Bridge fell, they spotted the Mothman on the bridge. I don't mean on the structural part of the bridge. Well, when they spotted the Mothman on the bridge, it flew over top of the bridge downriver, back under the bridge, and then up towards the TNT area in this direction anyway, up this way. And they said, like I say, different people were talking, and they said they thought that Cornstalk really had placed this curse on Point Pleasant, and he was, it's hard to describe, he was using the Mothman, in other words, to, you have to know Indian lore and all this stuff to understand what I'm trying to say. But he used the Mothman, in other words, to perform what he wanted to happen to Point Pleasant, and cause things to happen in that way, and as part of his curse. And, it was really a weird thing. It was everybody had all different kind of ideas, and supposedly answers for what happened, but until they found the real thing.
Do you think, all of this stuff has, Mothman and UFOs and all of curses and things, it's kind of lingered for a long time, and there's still no answer to a lot of this stuff. Do you think that the people of Point Pleasant still today, they want answers to these things, and do you think that they deserve them after all this time?
Yes, I believe the people here in Point Pleasant, Mason County, and surrounding, like, Gallia County, Meigs County, I believe they would like some conclusion, and some answer as to what, this thing really was. And I believe there will continue to be, just like, well, we don't know at this time right now, but I'd say no doubt right now there are different type, investigations and so on and so forth, that some of these people came in here and gathered evidence and so on, I'm talking about the material, type evidence, and trying to figure out, what this thing could be, where it could have come from or what. And I'm sure the people in this area would like some sort of closure, as to what this thing was. But I don't, in my own mind, I don't believe there ever will be any closure as to what did happen. Because, in my own personal opinion, it was either extraterrestrial or it was a mutation from this TNT area and the things that are in the ground and the waters that were stored here.
That's all the questions that I have written out for you, but I'm going to just ask you a few others, just, as well as what we talked about. In terms of like the chemical stuff, working at the chemical plant you used to work at, and then just kind of what you know from working there. Can you talk about any of that stuff at all, or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to get your opinion because you have an interesting perspective on it. You've worked with chemicals. You've worked in the chemical plant. Can you just talk about that and just knowing what type of dangers there are with that? Being in an area that's contaminated with such things.
Yes, sir. I worked at a chemical plant for 33 years, and I am now retired. I've been retired for approximately 5 years. And I know there, of course, we're talking about this place here, we're talking about back in the late 30s and in the 40s, okay? Back then, you didn't have strict rules on waste and what to do with it, okay? Now, you take that into comparison to what you have here, the different types of waste that was stored here, buried here, that were probably, I am suspecting that all these ponds being made here were made for like waste material, and so on. Okay. And at that time could be dumped freely. All right. Now, as I left Axochemical, at the time I did, understanding what, you have to do. Okay. At that plant, if we spilled a raw material or a material that could pollute the stream, say a vessel would run over and out on the ground, okay, we had to report this to OSHA. Then we had to go down so far, according how many gallons, and we had to remove all of that soil, all of that dirt, put it into drums, and have it incinerated, and then put new slag and everything back in there. And OSHA checked that out. And it was quite a price to get those drums incinerated. Okay. And that's what I was saying, like this area back in those days, there was no OSHA and there was no laws on this. And I know just like, places down there, in the plant, I won't, point out any particular places for my protection and other people. But, I know different places, you can go down several feet and there's places you cannot get rid of the waste. I mean, there's some waste that in the chemical plants that probably that you could have in the ground for a period of time. And that's back, like say years ago when these OSHA laws weren't really in effect that much. And they could sink so far into the earth that you couldn't go far enough to remove all of those chemicals that are hazardous and are dangerous. And just like speaking of this area here, excuse me. But I mean, I know I'm no scientist, no biologist, anything like that, no chemistry major or anything like that. But I'm saying in the TNT area, there is stuff in this ground and in this area that can never be gone deep enough to be removed. It will always be contaminated.
I want to ask you back to the Mothman. You had said you were in classmates or in the same school with the Scarberries and Mallets. Is that right? Or one of them? From the four kids that saw the thing that was the big kind of news event.
All of them, really. I knew a couple of them, and the others, I just knew by name.
Can you just tell me about after their big sighting, which gets all of the kind of coverage in the newspapers and everything? Can you tell me what that was like, just being in school? Like, was it a big thing? Were people talking about it? And when you start your answer, can you start it with something like, after the four teenagers spotted, after the first big Mothman sighting by the four kids up in the TNT plant? That way people know which people we're talking.
Yeah, after the sighting of the Mothman in the TNT area at the old power plant, the 4 kids there that actually were involved in that first sighting, I mean, they were just, I don't know, more or less aggravated to death constantly about, this and that and the other. And they kind of like heroes, or whatever you might want to say, as being the ones that first saw this thing and reported it. And of course, there was different people coming in from, well, actually, all over the world, France and England and all over, the different spots. And they're wanting to question these people and so on and so forth. And matter of fact, some of them just felt more, in other words, less about it than being a celebrity. It was just an aggravation and a nuisance, even though they had been the ones that spotted the thing the first time. And it was it was a big buzz around the schools. Yeah, it definitely was.
You had said you knew Marcella Bennett, and she had some strange things happen to her. We're following me a little bit about Marcella Bennett, knowing her, and if you know any of the weird things that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, Marcella Bennett. I remember her. She, I've known her actually almost ever since I've lived around here, and I moved here in 1959. And, 59. And, I mean, the stories that she would tell you about anything that she did see, I mean, I'd say they would, be confident. She could be confided in. And she did, I think she had a grandchild. I don't know if it was a grandchild. I think it was. Or maybe a niece or a nephew. And she had out there in the yard, and then she spied this thing, and the Mothman, and it scared her, and she didn't know what to do, and she was the one was talking about, I vaguely remember what she said about it. I do remember her seeing the Mothman and, the red eyes and so on, and said she ran inside. And I can't remember, there was someone inside the house that was there with her. And she went inside, and I guess she looked out the windows, and the thing came, fairly close to the house again. And, well, they were all scared, about that part of it. But and I think she saw it more than the once, spotted it more than the once. But I can, vaguely remember her statements on what she did say, but she could be confided in. I mean, her, Linda Scarberry, and what they would say. Tom, Yuri.
A lot of people. She was carrying equipment.
Oh my!
While she was making me breakfast.
Oh yeah, I don't.
Gee whiz, you should juggling then, weren't you? Oh me.
I just wanted to ask you, one other thing that we didn't talk about was that a lot of people in town, after seeing the Mothman or the UFOs, they were reporting that there were like government people talking to them later, what people call the Men in Black. You remember that at all? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I recall the Men in Black, recall them talking and speaking of the Men in Black, and different ones said that these Men in Black came around to their doors and told them to say nothing else of the Mothman. And they would turn to look inside, I guess, maybe for their mate, their wife, or their husband, or whoever. When they turned back, they were gone. I mean, like they vaporized, Excuse me. And that right there kind of reminds me, of possibility of an extraterrestrial, I mean, if these guys, would appear like this, and then they would just say almost appear to vaporize, I think the possibility that they could have been extraterrestrials and didn't want the word out, what was going on, and actually that this Mothman, you never know. You hear about different things in extraterrestrials, that they come down and I've heard this and read this and different things, and where they've extracted information from people's brains, like what, telekinesis, is that it? Telekinesis. And so, it's a possibility that the Mothman could have been an extraterrestrial, and these guys in black were the ones who were just trying to get the humans to shut up. We've got more to do here. Just shut up. Don't say anything else about the Mothman. And there were different people. It wasn't, excuse me, it wasn't just one person or one family that actually saw these men in black. They visited different houses. I mean, different people reported these men. And some of them said that, they came and then they told them this, and they went inside the house and they turned and come back out to look and to see if they could hear a car, and there was no car around. They heard no car take off, or anything.
And one more question, and I think we're good. A lot of the people that saw the Mothman, reported the Mothman, reported the UFOs, these are people that you had come into contact with just living around this area, and people that you knew. On the whole, the people that were seeing these things, reporting these things, were they church-going people? Were they good people? Were they people that you could trust, people that you respected their opinion? Can you tell me a little bit about that, knowing, you just personally kind of knew a lot of these people, and just what type of people were they?
Well, yes, the people, that spotted these different things, Mothman and, like the UFOs and the men in black and so on, everything that what I call leads up to the, mixture of the Mothman. These people, Tom Urey, I went to school with Tom. He was a good, upstanding guy. I know of him being one that saw the Mothman. And I think I would vouch for Tom Urey's word. And then there's Marcella Bennett. I've known her for years. And like I say, at one time we used to be neighbors. And she was a nice lady, real good lady. And there again, I believe you can confide in her and, confide in what she says. And then Linda Scarberry. Now, I didn't know Linda at the time. I knew her husband, and I can't remember his first name. That's been a long... Roger, yeah, Roger Scarberry. I knew Roger, and I knew Steve Mallet. And, they were both just ordinary Joes, I mean, like me, and I don't believe that they would have jumped up and spoke up and said, I saw this or I saw that, if they actually didn't see something. Now, I can't say what they saw. They gave a description of what they saw, and because actually they would have got a pretty decent look, because where they first spotted this thing was at the power plant. And they come by and saw it, or thought they saw something. They backed up. Well, when they backed up, there was a utility pole beside of this power plant. And these red eyes started coming out of there. Well, they looked, and the thing caught its wing on a guy wire on this power pole. And that's when they broke like heck and headed down towards the sheriff's office. And that's when the thing, they were in excess of speeds of 100 miles an hour, and the thing was flying over top of them, beside of them, bumping the roof of the car. And the same way at another time, an emergency squad vehicle, the thing was flying over it, behind it. They didn't know what it was, and somebody in there spotted it, and they said it was just bumping the top of that thing, trying to, I guess, I don't know, get them to wreck or whatever. But it, these people, different people that I know, I don't know everybody that spotted the Mothman, the UFOs, but there's different times, I'll have to commit myself, that I think that I spotted UFOs. I mean, I'm a type person, I won't go in and say, well, I spotted a UFO last night. When well, you're crazy, But there's different times that I've been on my porch. I live on a high ridge, and second highest spot in Mason County, and Redmond Ridge Road. And I've saw different things before. I mean, it wasn't planets. Gave no light like a planet. And gave no light like an airplane, no flashing beacons, and so on and so forth, like an airplane is lit. And I can honestly say that I believe that before that I have saw UFOs in this area myself.
What type of things have you seen? What did it look like?
Well, it was just like a real bright light. Like best way I can describe it is a bright ball of light. And it, in other words, just hanging there. Okay. You can see the stars, and your stars, they will put off a different, what would you call it? Different hue of light, so to speak. And this thing here was just, like diamond bright light. And I've even walked out on the porch and looked at it. Well, my wife looked at it one night. Now, this hadn't been very long ago. And she said, that thing is still there. And I said, that's a bright star. No, she said, it's not. So anyway, we watched the thing till, I don't know how many hours, just off and on. We'd step out on the porch, see if that thing was still hanging there. And then we go out some while later, it's not there. And other times, I just go out my porch there. I can go out, well, I'm looking right out in the sky, I'm up on a high hill. And I've just looked out different times. You see shooting stars and so on and so forth. But there's different times. I'm sure they exist. I'm a firm believer that UFOs exist. They do exist. And I'm a firm believer in that. And I'm a firm believer in that they do come around in this area, every areas of the world, because, they travel, my God, faster than light. The way people have saw them, and as fast as they move. And, but I'm a firm believer that there are UFOs. I've always have been. And I've read different true stories about ones that were, well, you probably have known about them too, that were covered up and hidden, and then people found them in these different hangars and so on. And this one guy that actually had a piece of one of them, and he, I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah, I like all that stuff. Do you think there's anything that I didn't ask you that's important about Mothman or anything else that we've been talking about? Did I miss anything that's important, do you think?
Well, the only thing that I think this is of great importance. And I think it actually should be out to the public. But as you know, my son wrote Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend, and that was his brainchild. And Jeff Gordon, Jeff Walmsley and Donnie Sergent Jr. had the book printed and, published. Okay. And the reason my son come up with this idea to do this book, it took him 1 year to write this book, was to help with the tourism in Point Pleasant, and that Point Pleasant might get back as a growing town, and actually the stores downtown that had emptied out might be filled once again and be a prosperous city, like it used to be years ago. And that was his main goal. I think he says in his book, on the back of his book, I think, talks about this. Okay. And ever since he was 13 years old, he'd always wanted to be an author. He'd wanted to write a book and get it published. Okay. He finally did it. He wrote this book, and he and Jeff together had it printed, published, released, and they thought, boy, if we can just get that thing on eBay and get it up in the top 500 books, man, we're going to have a book. Well, the thing was good enough till it passed Stephen King's book and Gene Simmons' book of the band Kiss. And the book went to number 40. And they were amazed. It sold worldwide. Okay. This was a good thing. This was a real good thing. Okay. But then we have a church in our community here that this thing is brought up in the pulpit about the Mothman. And I don't know what words exactly, I wouldn't want to quote what was said about it. And, but I do know people, reliable people, that actually quit this church, wouldn't go back to it. And there's other things I can't say. And it's right about this time is when my son had some problems with his nerves and so on. And he'd always wanted to write a book, always wanted to get one published. Well, he'd fulfilled his first goal, his first book. And now whether this had anything to do with his problems that he had with his nerves and so on and so forth, God only knows. I don't know. But in my own mind, I kind of believe it did. And I think this is sad. I think it's sad on the part of a church. And just like people getting up out of the audience and the congregation and saying, you know, if people go down to the unveiling of this Mothman statue, which is just a tribute to what was seen in Point Pleasant, it's no demon or no devil or nothing, you know. And for people to get up in the congregation and say if people, you know, go to this unveiling, that they're going to die and go to Hades. I mean, you know, this is poor. This is poor. And I'm not sure whether this is part of the downfall of my son. I mean, he lost interest in the Mothman. He and Jeff kind of lost contact and kind of, I don't know what you would say, kind of just maybe butted heads a little bit. And I don't think this is my son's disposition and personality. But now, you know, thank goodness he's back, headed the other way to recovery and to go back. He's supposed to go back to work next month full time at his old job that he's been off of for 2.5 to 3 years because of his condition. And I think this should been brought out because I think this is important parts. You know, we strive, all of us, all of our life, to be something and do something, contribute, you know. And here's a young man that is contributing to trying to help the town that he, might as well say, lives in, has lived in all of his life for 36 years. And he's trying to contribute and help. And, you know, then help get the tourism back, help the city to grow and come back and prosper, be a prosperous city again, you know. And a boy, the age that he was when he wrote that book, you know, and just thinking about something like that, not what he's going to get from the book, because that's the hardest thing. He just wanted to write the book. I mean, I can honestly tell you, and what he told me in my own words, I said, did you sell quite a few books a day? I said, did you get, you know, they go somewhere to a signing? Did you do pretty good? I don't know. You don't know how much money you made? Dad, I don't care about the money. Now, this is honest to God's truth. Hold my hand to God. What he said. I don't care about the money. I told you why I wrote the book. To bring prosperity back to Point Pleasant, promote tourism, and get my hometown back on the map. That's a true story, and I'll tell it again.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Eyes of the Mothman, the podcast. For more information about our program, or to find out where you can watch the original documentary film or purchase a limited edition signed DVD copy, please visit www.eyesofthemothman.com.